till that Persian king Agha Muhammad Khan ordered the execution of 2 servants for being too loud. Since it was a holy day, he postponed their execution by a day and made the servants return to their duties. They murdered the king in his sleep that night. I'm going to kill you tomorrow. But first, tuck me into bed. Worked out for Dread Pirate Roberts. This is also why when a company fires someone due to misconduct or economic layoffs, they usually don't give them any time to react. It's just a surprise meeting, being notified and then straight to pick your stuff escorted by security and get out. They don't want anyone to have time to vandalize or hack the systems. My eyes are closed and I'm waiting. But first, I want a very close shave. Seriously, the fucking balls on this guy. All the blood must be there, leaving his brain arid of any foresight. He was a eunuch though, so who knows. Makes me think of how many times that happened, and the servants still just went along to their deaths. You know, reverse card. Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom. I'm calling the police. Now, hand me the phone on that pillow over there while I lay here defenseless. Imagine the arrogance it takes to think anyone would value anyone else's life over their own. Why don't you just go to sleep, Eddie Murphy? I read this is Nanda the Relentless's voice. Good night, Wesley. Good work. Sleep well. I'll most likely kill you in the morning. Oh, and bring me my warm milk with honey before I go to bed. And no poison, you rascal. Came here to post this. Those servants weren't very Dread Pirate Roberts. Well, we killed the king. What now? Have you ever considered monarchy? You'd make a wonderful Dread Khan Mohammad. You sleep rather soundly, for a murderer. Shut up, Wesley. So what I've gathered here is, to not hesitate when executing servants. Right. Pretty sure this is the origin of the saying why put off to tomorrow what you can do today. 1CK3 Run told me that you never hesitate to execute. As a duke I once had a peasant rebel leader captured, but as he was a brilliant general and also super strong physically and a gifted swordsman, and I was making a play on my liege, the king thought that he would be an asset. One of the terms I set him for his release was he served me. I figured bribery and a title will calm him down. Bad idea, he took both, bided his time, added 2 more counties to his titles, helped me in my successful war to take the kingdom of the Palavas, and then at my weakest, when I was consolidating, struck. Liberty or death, he cried, and as a brilliant general attracted a lot of my vassals as allies. 4 years of war bankrupted me, and I barely won. Executed him when my more powerful neighbor to the north struck. This war with my former peasant rebel also left my levers empty, and I simply surrendered and went back to being a no-name duke. If only. Well, when you fire an employee, you drive him straight out the door. You don't tell him, hey, you're fired effective tomorrow. Today I need you to complete this important work. I don't know why this is so hard for people to grasp. The holy day was a blatant excuse that I'm sure we've all heard 100 times. Procrastination was what killed this man. Or not be a dicklistic. Or at least chain them up if they are gonna be executed tomorrow. They were sent back to their duties unimprisoned, and they knew from experience the dude followed through when he said he was gonna kill someone tomorrow, lol. Or at least keep your death row inmates locked up securely. Or maybe put them in the dungeon. Or at least throw M in the dungeons for the night. The real kicker is he tried to make M work like nothing had happened. Or, leave them in prison until you get around to it. Or, hesitate when ordering servants executed. I think that's the moral here. Looks like someone made an oopsie. Just have 2 dudes with nothing to lose keep living next to you. NBD. Chen Sheng was an officer serving the Qin dynasty, famous for their draconian punishments. He was supposed to lead his army to a rendezvous point, but he got delayed by heavy rains, and it became clear he was going to arrive late. Chen turns to his friend Wu Guang and asks, what's the penalty for being late? Death, says Wu. And what's the penalty for a billion? Death, says Wu. Well then, we are late, says Chen Sheng. And thus began the famous Dazexiang uprising, which caused thousands of deaths and helped usher in a period of instability and chaos that resulted in the fall of the Qin dynasty 3 years later. Picked a whole bouquet of oopsie daisies. He drew a garrow. Oopsie poopsie. It's historically hilarious. There was this super friendly, but giant, guy I worked with, and he was dealing with a problem guest. This little guy kept talking shit, testing the guy, and treating him like shit. Finally big guy says, "Look, motherfucker, if I take this uniform off, you do realize I turn into just a guy you're picking a fight with, right?" Or someone made one of those idiotic power moves, and it blew up in his face. He didn't have the balls to do it. I'm dying to know what happened to the assassins. Wikipedia doesn't go that far into the story. Looks like someone made an oopsie. I read this is Nanda the Relentless's voice from What We Do in the Shadows. Added quote. Ancient Chinese history. An army captain gathers his men and says, "What is the penalty for rebellion and treason? Death. What is the penalty for soldiers who fail to arrive at their post on time? Death too. Well, guess what guys, we are late." One thing led to another, and so endeth the Qin dynasty. During the civil war that led to his ascension as first citizen of the Roman Empire, Julius Caesar allowed his opponent's troops full amnesty if they laid down their weapons and ceased fighting. His opponent proclaimed no quarter or mercy for anyone on Caesar's side. Guess which side had more soldiers willing to fight to the death? Edit. Sorry, I misremembered when the first citizen thing became a thing. The rest should be accurate, though. Thanks to those who corrected me. A typical sign of a weak state is arbitrary application of the law. Since the state cannot properly adjudicate the law, a shortcut they use is just to make penalties higher. In England everything down to petty theft became a death sentence, yet executions didn't increase. That's because at that point the state was so weak they could barely adjudicate any crime, so to make up for their lack of enforcement they enforced laws arbitrarily. The random application of the death penalty acted as a deterrent. I imagine at that time the Qin dynasty was already suffering from systemic weakness that didn't allow it to function properly by the time it started making everything a death sentence. There's a few steps missing, notably alcohol being involved causing the lateness. But yep. This is also why the death penalty is illogical for any but the most heinous crimes. Facing death for stealing a horse. May as well make sure the farmer and his family don't tell anyone. For the record, I'm opposed to the death penalty for any reason. But for lesser crimes it just makes no sense. This would have been a way better movie than the new Mulan. I read this 3 times, and I still don't get it. Please explain like I'm retarded. Is that the captain that became first Han Emperor? It's treason then. God damn it guys, you were supposed to say you needed to have a piss. Now we have to go and get a whole other my god. This is why it's better to not have the death penalty for rape. I should specify, there's no penalty for a successful rebellion. Death is only the penalty for an unsuccessful rebellion. Ancient problems require ancient solutions. The Ascended Ancients, the Replicator Ancients, or just the run-of-the-mill Ancients? This was only 200 years ago lol. As ancient as cutting people's throat. This was shockingly recent. I think the part of the Wikipedia article about pouring molten lead onto the other dude's head is even more remarkable than the king's death. What a truly despicable human being. I think before he became king he was a nobleman in exile and was castrated for going after some noble's daughter by the girl's father. He was notoriously cruel. He allegedly killed all people who wronged him in his youth via extreme methods, like deep frying an oil seller who had sold him spoiled oil and then had mocked him when he demanded a refund. He would also harshly punish anyone who he felt was mocking him for his high voice and lack of facial hair. If I remember correctly, he also wiped a few cities loyal to the previous Shah Mongolian style. That was the part that got me too. The other guy was harmless, elderly, and blind. Georgie Martin must have been reading up on this guy at some point before writing the first Game of Thrones book. I read this out to my Iranian and he said this dude was the worst, most hated king who founded the worst, most hated Persian dynasty, the Qajas. His nephew who succeeded him, Agha Muhammad Shah, was a eunuch, went on to lose huge amount of territory. This was perhaps one of the most brutal eras of Persian history. It was Iran's War of the Roses period with multiple dynasties battling it out. It was a few generations of non-stop wars and the outcome was this eunuch king winning, and he was the cruelest of everyone. Oh boy, this was one of our crazier kings. In another one of his highlights, he had besieged the city of Kerman, which had been protecting his dynastic rival, Lotfali Khan's and my ancestor. After his victory, Agha Muhammad Khan executed and blinded the majority of Kerman's male inhabitants to punish the city for sheltering his enemy. He was presented with 20,000 eyeballs. That's where old George got the inspiration for Game of Thrones. History was metal as fuck. I'm not 100%, but fairly certain it is because of stories like this that our condo board president stopped ordering executions of residents who play their music too loud, opting instead for a light fine or a stern warning letter. Del Boca Vista. Man, your hoa is much more lenient than mine. So did the servants end up getting executed? Edit. Yes. Seems like they should be king. Seriously, how is this not in the article? Edit. It has been added to the article since I posted this. Unfortunately, it does not say. It just says they assassinated him and his nephew succeeded him. No, one crime cancels the other. They were dismembered and burned to death 3 years later. Robespierre died in a very similar way less than 3 years earlier. He told people he had a new list of traitors. Some of them were on it, and he would announce them the next day. Let's kill everyone and cut all their heads off, said Robespierre, until someone had the bright idea to cut his head off. Dude. Robespierre also tried to commit suicide when the rebellion came knocking at his door, demanding justice when he was still living lavish and being an asshole, despite revolutionary killing all those living lavish and being an asshole over the common folk. But he ended up trying to shoot himself in the head from the jaw aiming up. All this did was make him destroy his jaw and fall into shock as his house was invaded. He then lived in detainment and horrible pain before finally being executed days later. A true champion. There's a really good 3-part documentary on that on it. The guy was nuts, wanted to start his own sun worship religion or something like that. He forgot to call a timeout. My first thought was, how did the servants even enter the royal chamber? And then I read this. They were joined by the valet Bassi Mazandarani, who was in the plot with them, and the three invaded the royal pavilion, and with dagger and knife murdered the Shah. Looks like His Highness was a royal pater. He was even warned, but chose not to take advice. Sadat Khani Shagagi, a prominent emir, interceded on their behalf, but was not listened to. Interceded means he tried to vouch for them, not that he tried to warn the king. Turns out kings that would have people executed for simply being too loud aren't the most popular rulers. What's a pater? Shit, the guy could have been just a normal pater and completely ignore the fact that the people who work in his palace might not want to see their friends get executed. Looks like His Highness was a royal pater. Ordered the death of two loud-mouthed ingrates for daring to speak at a volume that irked me. I delayed the order for day and everything. What more could they want? They murdered me in my sleep, but I still think I was in the right. Ater. They played Crusader Kings. He made his courtiers so angry they became agents in another's plot, and many of his descendants became managers. Or they would have, if he wasn't castrated as a youth. And nothing of value was lost. A leader who is that flippant with the lives of his people and that stupid about human behavior is unlikely to be a successful leader. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer and your condemned men far away. He was impotent and unattractive. Ordered 46 pounds of eyes to be taken out from males between age of 20 and 40 years old in my hometown Kerman, southeast of Iran. Edit. Spelling. Shocked Pikachu face. Kings can be so stupid sometimes. No, you. Heh. Well, no wonder he was cruel and always in a foul mood. The poor guy was castrated. Never put off until tomorrow what you should do today. Not this guy. Servants, better call an ambulance. Also servants, but not for us. Ironic. He could save others from death, but not himself. I once heard I was getting laid off after a major company came through and surveyed the upgrade to a machine I had spent 2 years designing. They were going to purchase the design and fire me. So that night I quietly removed the sole copy of the blueprints and dismantled the device. The next day I turned my phone off and refused to answer about 30 frantic calls from the owner. His voicemails were getting more desperate as he stood to make $400k just for the design. He even admitted on one he was wrong to have planned on letting me go. I eventually was contacted by the major company with interest in purchasing the design, and they'd deal with my former employer. Long story short, I made $20k and my former employer got a large payout as well. 20k is better than the boot, but I for sure thought I was going to get sued and lose everything for a few weeks. Lol. Felt good to come out on top. I need more stories like this in my life. It says in the article he garbed fame for being a eunuch king, as he was castrated by his captors as a young man. TBH, I'd be pretty irritable too. Now Mr. Bond, I've got you dead to rights, and instead of just killing you, here is my plan. This makes more sense. More sense than what? Rookie mistake. You can't fire me, I quit. Till that Agha Muhammad was a stupid person. When you got literally nothing left to lose from escaping and killing the king. Sounds like just the sort of cover story one might use to kill the king and get yourself made the new king. The servants did it. I saw them. No, I did not pay them. Now let us execute them before they can disagree with me. They pulled what's known as a pro-gamer move. Why wouldn't you forgive them or jail them? This is just dumb. I don't think anyone alive today can comprehend the level of stratospheric egotism that would develop from being an absolute monarch with the power of life and death over their people, completely devoid of any form of legal process or human rights. Unfathomable privilege foisted through no other reason besides being born from the correct vagina. Rulers that had to work for their power, either through a combination of political wheeling and dealing, and getting their hands dirty, I'd assume, are a little more appreciative of those who work under them, that they wouldn't order their execution for trivial bullshit. When your entire life is literal, I say it, make it so. You get the idea that you're somehow untouchable. Never mind the fact that most kings have shorter lifespans than their subjects for exactly this reason. They are so self-absorbed that they believe they will be the exception, because only they are truly untouchable. Ick now. Unlike all the previously untouchable people who also got murdered by those meant to serve them. Go get Crusader Kings. Forgiving never works out. Best to accrue dread. Pretty sure that's not murder, it's self-defense. Surprised that they didn't wake him up before they could kill him, you know, cause they were so loud. Medieval problems require medieval solutions. And the last thing he saw was two servants with their index finger over their mouth making a noise that sounded like shhhhh. Good night, Wesley. Good work. Sleep well. I'll most likely kill you in the morning. Is this murder? It's self-defense. But did they do it quietly? They weren't too loud that night when they were sneaking up on him. Agha Muhammad's successful reign was short-lived, as he was assassinated in 1797 in his tent in the city of Shusha, the capital of the Karabakh Khanate, 3 days after he had taken the city, 39, and less than 3 years after he had taken power, according to Hasani Faseh's Fasnami Nasri. During Agha Muhammad's stay in Shusha, one night a quarrel arose between a Georgian servant named Sadat Gorgi and the valet Kodadadi Isfahani. They raised their voices to such a pitch that the Shah became angry and ordered both to be executed. Sadat Khani Shagagi, a prominent emir, interceded on their behalf, but was not listened to. The Shah, however, ordered their execution to be postponed until Saturday, as this happened to be the evening of Friday, the Islamic holy day, and ordered them back to their duties in the royal pavilion, unfettered and unchained, awaiting their execution the next day. From experience, however, they knew that the king would keep to what he had ordered, and, having no hope, they turned to boldness. When the Shah was sleeping, they were joined by the valet Abbasi Mazandarani, who was in the plot with them, and the three invaded the royal pavilion, and with dagger and knife murdered the Shah. 2. The three delivered the Shah's jewelry to Sadat Khani Shagagi. The jewels were later recaptured in war and his 3 killers were executed by dismemberment and burning. You get what you fucking deserve, Murray. That wiki entry reads like my 15-year-old son wrote it, and language arts is not his strongest subject. My son spends most of his time thinking of random things to say and dabbing, so I believe you. Good. And if Reddit had been around in those days, it would have been top post on r/instant karma. I sentence you to death, but tomorrow. Until then, go about your lives and forget all about it. King, I sentence you two to death. Servants, pull out reverse Uno card. Good night. Servants, good work. Sleep well. I'll most likely kill you in the morning. Moral of the story, never postpone till tomorrow what you can do today. Sounds to me like they gave him exactly what he wanted, eternal peace and quiet. P. Never fire someone at the start of their shift unless you are sending them home. And never ever threaten someone's life, then give them time to think about it.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment Reddit Story Time for more Reddit stories.